The world knew him because the old man, but behind the cameras, Richard Harrison turned into living a nightmare. Now his spouse is suing their own son over $500,000 in lacking coins. And the dark reality is coming out. Did Rick Harrison surely trick his mother while she became in a coma? Did the vintage guy recognize about the betrayal earlier than he died? Today, the fact approximately TV's preferred pawnshop circle of relatives will leave you speechless. Richard Benjamin Harrison Jr., best called the Old Man from Pawn Stars, became born on 1941 in Danville, Virginia. When he changed into just 12 months vintage, his family moved to Lexington, North Carolina. They lived in a small house at 115 Peacock Avenue, a modest home that pondered their working magnificence life. His father worked as a welder and carpenter, suffering to offer for the circle of relatives. Money became continually tight, and Richard learned early on that hard work was the most effective way to get by means of. At 14, he took on a process that most teenagers wouldn't even recall. He had become a college bus driving force, early each morning to pick up children and convey them to high school. He parked the bus at his residence overnight and earned about 5 or 6 greenbacks every week. It wasn't lots, however. It turned into a massive assist to his own family. School wasn't his pinnacle priority. He attended Lexington High School but dropped out in his junior year. The financial struggles at home made it clear that earning a residing became extra important than finishing faculty. At 17, his lifestyle took a sudden turn. He met Joanne Rue at a barn dance, a moment that would form the rest of his life. Around the identical time he made a mistake that would have destroyed his future, he stole an automobile and got caught. Standing before a choose, he become given picks, visit jail or join the military. The choice become easy. In October 1958, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, a choice that would change everything. His plan was to serve for 4 years. But things did not pass as anticipated. 2 years into his service, he married Joanne. Not lengthy after, their first infant, Sherry, became born. She had Down syndrome and required costly hospital treatment. To make sure his daughter had access to the remedy she wished, Richard re-enlisted, extending his time inside the Navy. Over the next a long time, he served on 4 unique ships. He rose through the ranks and have become a petty officer, First Magnificence. His assignments took him across the Pacific. He served on destroyers like USS Orlick and USS Twining, and later joined Tactical Air Control Squadron 21.1, where he coordinated air operations. His longest tour turned into aboard USS Shawanok from 1971 to 1975. During that point, he finished more than 1 deployment and earned numerous commendations, such as the Good Conduct Medal and Vietnam Service Medal. Despite his fulfillment, the Navy kept him far away from home for long periods. He spent almost half of his profession at sea, missing treasured time along with his family. By 1979, with 3 teenage sons at home, he decided, after 20 years of provider, he retired from the military. Richard Harrison and his spouse, Joanna, moved to San Diego, hoping to construct a success destiny. They started an actual property business and labored tough, even managing to open their personal workplace. For some time, things appeared promising. Then the early 80s added a monetary collapse that turned their fulfillment into catastrophe. Mortgage interest quotes skyrocketed to 18%, sending the housing marketplace into disaster. The Harrisons had invested heavily in real property, believing they had been securing their destiny. Instead, they lost almost $1 million. Losing the whole thing should have damaged them, but Harrison refused to surrender. Later in Lifestyles, he credited his Navy training for coaching him resilience and a strong work ethic. He knew they needed to begin over, even if that meant leaving San Diego behind. In April of 1981, with just $5,000 left, the Harrisons packed up and moved to Las Vegas. This wasn't a flow packed with wish. It became a determined gamble. Las Vegas wasn't but the booming town it would emerge as, but Harrison saw potential. He believed they might rebuild from scratch. Soon after arriving, he and his son Rick opened a small second-hand save referred to as gold and silver coin. It changed into just 300 rectangular FTs, barely huge sufficient to run an enterprise they set up on Las Vegas Boulevard South, doing something they could to herald clients, but things didn't take off right away. Money became tight. To preserve the own family afloat, Rick worked nights, repossessing automobiles even as walking the shop all through the day. The enterprise struggled inside the beginning, but the Harrisons refused to fail. By 1986, they'd outgrown the tiny shop and moved to a larger vicinity. Still, Harrison and Rick had bigger plans. For years, pawn licenses in Las Vegas had been almost impossible to get. The city had strict regulations that confined how many might be issued. But Rick paid close interest. He tracked population increase, often calling town officers, knowing that if the town increased, extra licenses might subsequently be to be had. His endurance paid off. In 1989, after years of persistence, they finally secured one in all Las Vegas's quite coveted pawn licenses. The following year, they opened Gold and Silver Pawn Shop at 713 Las Vegas Boulevard South, simply miles from the Strip. It changed into the proper area at the proper time. By 2005, the store became loaning out around $3 million at 12 months and bringing in $700,000 in hobby income. Business was thriving, however, getting there hadn't been clean. Las Vegas changed into full of pawn stores and competition turned into difficult. Many people noticed the industry as shady, full of corporations that took gain of customers. The Harrisons knew they had to earn human beings' trust. Rick had spent years studying records and antiques. His understanding gave the store an inside. He ought to spot precious objects that others neglected. Instead of focusing on simple lists on gold, earrings, and electronics like most pawn shops, they built a popularity for coping with uncommon collectibles and ancient artifacts. That made them exceptional. Trust was simply as crucial as stock. The Harrisons treated customers fairly, which helped them construct loyalty. By the early 2000s, the store changed into widely known in Las Vegas. Gamblers who lost cash at casinos frequently pawned valuables simply to get home. Collectors got here in seeking out uncommon reveals. Some simply desired to see what kind of treasures had been inner. Over the years, the shop's stock became even extra specific. They sold and offered Roman coins, samurai swords, or even a 2001 New England Patriots Super Bowl ring, once owned via cornerback Brock Williams. Word unfolded, and by using 2010, the shop had grown to be a go-to spot. Tourists and creditors packed the store every day. The demand becomes so excessive that they had to hold increasing. By October of that year, the showroom had grown to over 500 rectangular feet. In 2003, something surprising occurred on the Gold and Silver Pawn Keep in Las Vegas. A past-due night display called Insomniac with Dave Attell featured the store in all its episodes. For Maximum Human Beings, it changed into only a short section, approximately an uncommon enterprise. But for Rick Harrison, it becomes something greater. He had been attempting for years to convince TV networks that a truth display approximately his pawn shop ought to pay. He knew that people would be fascinated by the rare items that came via the doorways and the negotiations that happened each day. But network executives didn't see it that way. One even instructed him that no person might watch four fat guys in a pawn shop. That appearance on Insomniac proved otherwise. It caught the attention of TV producers, who noticed the capability for a display. They found out that this wasn't only a pawn store, a place full of history, precise gadgets, and strong personalities. Rick, his father Richard, the antique man Harrison, his son Corey, and their longtime friend Chumley were in thrilling blend, tension, and masses of expertise about rare collectibles. It took some more years for the whole lot to come back together, but by 2008, the idea had taken shape. The show could attention on history, negotiations, and the circle of relatives dynamics inside the store. At first, it became called Pawning History. Became Interested, however, felt the name wasn't pretty proper. They rebranded it Pawn Stars, a play on words that was catchy enough to seize interest. On July 19, 2009, the display premiered. Within simply 10 weeks, it became the best-rated display on the History Channel. The only truth display within the US.A with higher scores became Jersey Shore. As Pawn Stars won popularity, the gold and silver pawn keep modified forever. Before the show, it had approximately 70 traffic an afternoon. By October 2010, that wide variety had skyrocketed to over 1,000. People from all around the world got here to see the store, meet the forge, and maybe even buy something for themselves. The show increased globally, airing in more than 150 nations and being translated into 38 languages. One of the maximum recognizable faces at the display turned into Richard Harrison, higher called the Old Man. He became born on March 4, 1941 in Danville, Virginia. Before turning into a pawnbroker, he spent over 20 years in the Navy. In 1989, he and Rick opened the Gold and Silver Pawn Save in Las Vegas. Even earlier than the show, Richard changed into recognized for his no-nonsense mindset. He were given the nickname the Old Man, whilst he became just 38 because of his severe persona. On display, he became a fan preferred. He turned into tough, sharp, and constantly ready to call out horrific offers. He regularly butted heads with Corey and Chumley over their decisions. However, that most effective made the show more pleasing.